name is Marcus Mattern. I teach ceremonial magic. I run a Facebook group with 8,000 members this year and growing, and it's been taking off really amazingly. And I really love magic. I have been practicing ceremonial magic every day for 5 years now, and that's been really a completely life-changing event for me. And in the process of that, I've attained the knowledge and conversation of my holy guardian angel, changed my complete life. And everything that I do is built toward helping my clients to align with the true will, start to develop a relationship with their holy guardian angel, and start to have some of that energy into their life. Because I find repeatedly that the more we focus on what we actually want to be doing, the more we start to separate from the influences of friends and family, which, however helpful, are not always for the best, or genuine and authentic to us, and also the influences of advertising the government and everything else, which are not always in our best interests. And when we individuate ourselves in that way, we can start to really live in a way that's more in alignment with what we want to be doing on this world and just be happier. I was so miserable before I started practicing magic. And yeah, it's just allowed me to find positive engagement in the world in a way I never thought possible beforehand. So yeah, that's what I do. I teach magic, help people to find their true selves, and that is me.
You brought up true will and the holy guardian angel, and because technically I come from out of the Golden Dawn tradition, and technically we don't really have that. Of course, back in the 90s, there was a much less clear distinction, especially in the popular imagination, between what Crowley was teaching and what the Golden Dawn represented. And of course, it was very hard to distinguish those two for a lot of people, because all we knew of the Golden Dawn was from Regardie, who was, of course, highly influenced by Crowley, right? He kind of took Crowley's occasional hypothesis of magic being all psychological, and I say occasional because it seemed like just an occasion in which this, as Libras do, they just sort of say, hey, now I'm this, or I think this now. And they're just testing it out and balancing it out before they hand it off to the next air sign for perfection, right? In the same way the Geminis are the creators of many thoughts, or at least symbolically. And so, Crowley had this idea, and Regardie, you can tell Regardie loved the idea, because he's like, okay, he left Crowley and became a psychotherapist, right?
Yeah.
Crowley's like, maybe magic's all in our head, and Regardie's like, I got it. I'm gonna take that and run with it all the way. And thank God he did, honestly, because magic does have a psychological side, a heavy psychological component to it. That's a huge piece of it. So to just study it on those terms alone is super valuable. But what does it mean then for you, the holy guardian angel and true will? And what did it mean in the context of a 5-year journey for you outside of any formal structures?
Absolutely. So yeah, I started off reading John Michael Greer's books. I started off first with Monsters, which is a fantastic book, because he talks about ghosts and angels and demons and all kinds of supernatural entities in a way that is surprisingly skeptical, to where it talks about, if you think you're seeing a spirit, you might not be seeing a spirit. Here's all the things that it could be instead of a spirit. If you've ruled out all these other possibilities, here's what the traditional lore says about your types of experiences. And that was so refreshing to me, because it's so different than what I find a lot of new agey content, in particular, when it comes to talking about encounters with supernatural entities, or entities that people are just not aware of. And through that, I started reading more of his work, started to read his work on Golden Dawn magic specifically, Circles of Power, Paths of Wisdom, Learning Ritual Magic. And those 3 books basically became my entire school of magic. I learned how the overall structure of Hermetic Kabbalah through that, and started practicing on my own, started to really embrace the hands-on approach to magic of just doing stuff and seeing what I could change using these rituals about my life, about myself, about everything. And one of the great things about John Michael Greer, even though he's written over 100 books, he's surprisingly approachable. You can find him online. You can ask questions. And I've only even had to ask questions of him a handful of times. And half the time he answers just keep doing magic and you'll figure it out. And, as you said, something you might start saying to your students, because it's true. The structure of magic will teach you magic to a certain extent. And so the more that I practiced Golden Dawn, I'll say Golden Dawn style magic, it wasn't based on any particular order, but it was what I picked up from various authors teaching Golden Dawn magic, including John Michael Greer, a bit from Damien Eccles, and starting to use these influences to start to develop my own sense of what magic is, what it can do, and how it can transform myself using this path. John Michael Greer actually includes a invocation for your holy guardian angel in his book on circles of power. So the way that Golden Dawn was presented to me, the whole HEA had already been smuggled in. So it wasn't until I started learning, like reading the original books and looking at, self-initiation to Golden Dawn and stuff like that, where I realized, like, oh, it's not here. But, you might find some references to true self or higher self, but it's not the same thing as the HEA. So to me, it's closely related to that idea of true will, the idea that there is a purpose to your life, whether you're aware of it or not, and it's actually encoded into you, and it's encoded into the most authentic desires that you have, that are not only individual to you, not the result of influences from outside, because everyone's always trying to impose on us expectations, archetypes that we're supposed to follow. You're supposed to be this kind of son, this kind of daughter, this kind of brother, sister, this kind of employee, this kind of anything, this kind of magician. It's still in the spiritual world. You still get these false expectations that we get burdened with, that are there to make other people happy, or what other people think will make them happy, and they're not what will truly make ourselves happy. And the more we start to, purify ourselves and get rid of all of these negative influences, the more we start to hone in on our individual will. And once we have a better sense of our individual will, now we need to find a way of expressing it in the world in a way that doesn't harm anyone, that benefits us, but not at anyone else's expense. There's two reasons for that. First of all, it's a waste of time. If you enter into conflict with other people when you could avoid it, all that energy spent on conflict, even if you win, could be saved and redirected to doing what you wanted to do in the first place before there was a conflict. And that's the first reason to do it. Is just practical, avoid that waste of energy. And then the second reason to do it is that there is a deeper purpose behind all of this. I studied philosophy, studied Plotinus and Neoplatonist philosophy, and the idea that everything, Plotinus actually came up with the scheme of the four worlds that we see in the Tree of Life. The one, the divine intellect, the world soul, and the material world, called the absolute or mental plane, the Bria or astral plane, the Yetzirah or etheric plane, and Asya, material plane. This structure of metaphysics goes back to ancient Greece, and the idea that everything leads back to the one. Everything leads back to this point at which we are united in our existence, where there is pure unity. Is really core to the metaphysics of the Golden Dawn as I was taught. And so finding a way to express your will in a way that honors that essential unity, where the idea is that we're all different parts of some beautiful, miraculous whole that is too large for us to even conceive of or see. But the more that we believe in it, and the more that we start to act as if it exists, the more we start to realize it in the world, and the more we can create harmony within our own lives and with other people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Golden Dawn system is it's got different, it flirts through different schemas and mythological formats, right, to present a variety range of metaphysics and cosmologies. But I think the underlying one is certainly this Neoplatonic idea, for sure.
The sense of unity.
Like not. And of course, now we have a better understanding of the Hermetica, which is nice, and that's always going to keep improving. So that's going to offer new nuances and interpretations for people who want to work within that schema. And then there, of course, is the monistic approach as opposed to the emanationist one, which is also baked into the system, and you can, however you want to go about it. It could be simply just a methodological difference, though of course your conception of a thing creates the context in which you behave and act. That there, which is why the akephalos, right, is not the same, is not the bornless ritual, and the bornless ritual is not Liber Samic, and none of those are melon. And you might talk as if they produce all the same thing, but I'm not convinced they do at all, really. I think with the Abramelin, it's like you're really working with an intercessory sort of spirit, like in the true grimoire, well, in the light grimoire. But this idea, it looks like that just got inflated. You know what I mean? I just think it seems like they inflated the holy guardian angel into this
the concept.
Self conception, and by doing so limiting what the higher self was interpreted as, because the higher self, I think, had in the Golden Dawn era originally a very different idea than people apply to it today, right? I think they saw it more in the way that Rudolf Steiner saw it, and Rudolf Steiner saw the higher self as the ego, as the I. That's the I. Self, the I, not the me, but the I, the ego. And I think if you said that to someone, if you had clarified that distinction for people, like when I was learning stuff in the 90s, they would have gotten very upset. Good stuff, and all the John Michael Greer stuff that I started reading at a young age was just was very helpful. And of course, I connect highly with his druidry and the druidic stuff he produces.
Yeah, that was actually really essential for me, even getting a better understanding of the planes that I mentioned earlier, the four worlds of the Tree of Life. He talked about planes in a Druid book about the way that they're overlapping systems, the way that the weather can be one system of a piece of land, its weather, and then its water cycle, and then the fauna on it. And all of these things are independent systems, but they're all there simultaneously to establish whatever the ecology is. And the planes essentially work the same way for us. And I talked about them in terms of the mental plane being responsible for the meanings of things, also our attention and our habits that get formed through the structures of attention that we form, and then the astral plane being really responsible for identification and the archetypes that kind of influence us, both astrologically and in terms of, the archetype of being a magician, the archetype of being a son, the archetype of being any role in society. And then the etheric plane, and then the emotions and the emotional factors that come into something. And then of course, the material plane and the actions we actually take as a result of all these other influences. And so the way that I've been able to structure reality as a result of not just reading about magic and understanding it philosophically, but directly interacting with these levels, being able to do etheric magic, being able to do astral magic, and start to understand how that changes my emotions, how that changes my identity, and start to, I think of magic as applied philosophy as a way to take all of these abstract concepts and then actually use them to get results.
Yeah, don't tell Justin Sledge that, eh?
I would love it if he applied some philosophy. That would be fantastic.
I'm going to test out your logic. Just right back, I got to get my quartz.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I think
here's your thesis, yes or no, let's douse it.
Oh yeah, I would love for more research to be done regarding magic. If it wasn't for the research around meditation, I probably wouldn't have gotten into spirituality at all. I was really agnostic for a long time, and then looking at the profound changes in meditation, I'm like, I should do this. And after doing it for 10 years, I started experiencing things that are in none of the literature, because they research meditators for like a couple of years. They do a little bit of research on the people who are like fully enlightened to see how they look under scans. But nobody really looks at the way that it can completely transform your relationship with yourself. And so by doing that, I realized like, oh, there's real stuff here that people do not know about. What else is real? And that really inspired me to go back to magic, to go back to these other things that I dabbled with, and to try to get results. And the same thing actually happened to Damien Eccles. One of the reasons I really connected with him is that he was studying meditation and getting some results of it, but also getting frustrated by it like I was. And then he decided to use those skills to go back to magic, and that started to transform everything for him.
So how did you feel about Aaron Leach on my podcast commenting that Golden Dawn people from different groups shouldn't do ritual together?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's a take.
You saw his reaction when I said, "What about ritual work?" It was almost like a,
"Oh, no, yeah, yeah."
I show someone the way things or something like that. And of course, I was raised and trained in that mentality, of course, in the same ethos. But I questioned that ethos all along, and I clearly have come to different conclusions than many others have about it.
Yeah, I think there's a really strong draw when it comes to magic for maintaining the integrity of a certain system. And that's really popular, especially in the grimoire tradition, which Aaron is very much involved in. But I feel there needs to be some amount of flexibility, adaptability for traditions to survive, and importantly, to become more popular and not less over time. And I think the changes that happen mentally, and also to the potentially the egregores and the traditions of the different orders that are coming together when two people from different orders practice magic, is ultimately positive. It may be disruptive, especially in the short term, where people from different orders have different ways of doing things, and then they do magic together. Oh, you do it that way? That's weird. And it takes a minute for people to get along and to find a way to get in sync. But for solo practitioners, that adaptability is mandatory. Like, everyone's going to develop tons of idiosyncrasies in their solo practice, and those kind of have to be sacrificed to some extent or made negotiable in order for you to come together to do magic with anyone ever. And so that degree of negotiation is sort of just taken for granted among solo practitioners. But I think it's really valuable if you can find people from different orders with that degree of flexibility to start to express come together and find a new understanding of magic that doesn't exist in either order, but exists between them, exists when they come together. I think that really starts to get more perspectives on the magic. And that's what I find most interesting. And this is why my group is not just focused on Golden Dawn magic. It's focused on every kind of magic that gets results. Because I'm really interested in trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Why is it that we can do all these practices to exercise the imagination to reliably get transformations in ourselves and transformations in our world? And one of the conclusions that I came to is that so much of the world is essentially magic, and we just don't call it that. I talk a lot about nations, laws, and money. None of these things are made out of matter. They're made by decree. They're made out of human imagination and agreement. And it's just the fact that we agree to them that makes these ideas real, whereas other ideas are not real. And most people think that the ideas that are real, you have to accept and you have to obey, and you have no choice over them. But when you study magic, you're like, no, I have power of my own imagination. I can start to create a reality. I can start to create a new way of existence and project that in the world surrounding me. And suddenly the world plays along, nature plays along, reality itself seems to play along, and real things start to happen.
For those, I'm sorry for those listening, some of you don't want to hear about experiences. That's what we're going to probably talk a lot about.
Oh, totally.
Stay on this. Like, yeah, that was the shocking thing. Like, the idea that I could call and imagine these archangels, and that there was some sort of, there felt like an actual foreign presence around me, and like at least I was tapping into something. I didn't think that like they were evoked. I was the book back then in my day was the big evocation book that all the kids had was Konstantinos's Summoning Spirits. So I get sort of like that was the Brand X Ash and Shasan of those days. I just say that because it was a thin, flippy little book with pictures and that sort of thing. It wasn't the magnum opus status of Frater Ash and Shasan's Gateways Through Light and Shadow, or Stone and Circle, whichever the big one is. Stone and Circle, Light and Shadow, right? If you're familiar with his work, yeah. So there's much more monumental works that we have from magicians these days, but back then we still had these books about the spirit will actually show up and here's a picture of what it looks like, and you're like, well, what will I experience? Well, it doesn't tell you, it just says the spirit will show up and look like it. We still have this today with magicians who write like that, like John R. King, right? They just
and it's so rare to get actual visual apparitions. I had that. It was the funniest thing. I had that once, waking up in the middle of the night, towering over my bed, taller than the ceiling, were these two like gray shadows. And I thought, I hope you guys are good, because otherwise I am screwed. Like, I could just feel the power emanating off of these individuals, and turned out to be angels. I'd never met or heard of before. They had a ritual for me. Doing that ritual led me to a communication with God that I found really profound. But it was that is so rare for anything to appear visual, and even when it does appear, it's like the form of a person rather than a clearly defined thing that would be the same that you see with your visual eyes. And most of the time you end up with was it stuff in your mind's eye? But I find that to be incredibly significant. I think that a lot of psychic development works through making your mind's eye more receptive so you can start to receive things. This is how remote viewing is based, and remote viewing is extremely results orientated. So there can be really profound experiences, both vertical and also personal, that you have when you allow your mind's eye to be shaped by what's coming up. But you need to start to develop it first, which is why I think actively visualizing through magic and deciding what the angels are going to look like in your mind's eye as you do this can be a gateway to developing more receptive quality of imagination, where you start to receive visions, where you start to receive information. And when you start doing that, you get stuff that you couldn't get otherwise. You start to talk to entities and get names that you look up in Google a moment later and go, whoa, that's real? Like, this was the real thing that was talking to me. Or you get practical advice that leads to tremendous success. Or you get prophecy, premonitions, predictions of stuff that's going to happen. And one of the predictions I got working with spirits was accurate 6 months to the day in advance, because I asked for when it would happen, and it was given an astrological election rather than an actual a specific date, which I found really interesting. Yeah. But to the day of that astrological election, the day passed and I thought nothing had happened, but the thing I did to set things in motion directly led to ended up becoming what I had asked about. So yeah, there can be so many tremendous experiences when you relax your mind, when you allow, and I call it the psychic handshake. You never realize this, but when you shake hands with someone, half of your experience is the shape of your own hand. And I feel the same is true for most of our experiences in the mind's eye. Half of what we're experiencing is just ourselves. It's just our own imagination. But the other half of that often is an entity that's trying to use our imagination to communicate with us, to use the archetypes and ideas we have available to communicate its intent, its will. I actually think in terms of wills rather than identities, because I feel like a lot of the powers we're working with will wear an identity the same way you can wear a hat. Like they can put it on and they can perform within that scheme, but it's not them. It's not the most essential part of who they are, because we're so attached to our identities and we think of our identity as the most essential part of who I are. And the way I've been discovered, like at least what I've discovered through magic, the idea that there is this will that is driving me to become whoever I need to be to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And the personality I have is as much a part of me as the suit that I'm wearing. It can be taken off, it can be transformed, it can become something else as it needs to in order to accomplish something. And I feel like that's what I get a lot of times when working with entities, especially more powerful ones, is that they will assume the shapes that will help me accomplish whatever I need to accomplish, but it doesn't mean that they are that. It means that that's what they have chosen in order to work with me.
Yes. Struggling here with the ontological question, or gonna just sweep it under the rug?
Oh, what's the ontological question for you?
Well, yeah, the reality of these things.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
address the reality of these things without addressing the reality of reality. Right.
My reaction, having come to occultism as an atheist who studied the philosophy of science and really struggling with the ontological status of these entities for a while, before I realized that it's not that these entities are so much realer than people think they are. Actually, they are. It's that they are in the experience, the ephemeralness of magic, where you can have real experiences, where you can have real transformations and still ask yourself, was that real? Was that all in my head? Am I just that powerful? Like, what is really going on in this realm? That ephemeralness isn't escapable. We're not going to have the kind of concrete certainty in magic that we have in science. The disturbing reality is that science is a lot more ephemeral than anyone actually wants to believe it is. And this is something that Donald Hoffman has done a lot to really argue definitively in my mind with his book, The Case Against Reality. He was an evolutionary scientist who realized that if you're taking the theory of evolution seriously, then you have to consider that human beings' conception of reality is an evolved product, that we have actually evolved the way that we see the world not necessarily to reflect the way the world actually is, but only in such a way as to perpetuate our own survival and our own success. And that radically changed my view of magic, where it's like, okay, maybe we're just evolving into a new space, a new terrain. And it's so chaotic because we haven't been doing it for that long, at least not as many of us have been doing it for that long. And we're starting to try to grasp what can we do in this new space of manipulating reality through, talking to these entities, working with these states of consciousness, and all of that. And what's the capsule version of Donald Hoffman's argument is that if veridicality, that is the quality of things to exist outside the mind as they exist in the mind, if that has a non-zero calorie cost, then we didn't evolve to have it. Because there are so many other things that are worth our survival that we would have evolved to develop first, rather than simply, being able to see the world the way it actually is. That doesn't necessarily have any value from an evolutionary perspective. And the really mind-blowing thing that he doesn't go into, that I took away from reading his book, is that the ontological structure of objective reality is very different than most people conceive. It's not like a reflection. It's not a correspondence. It's not like I have a model of reality and then reality matches that. It's the idea of this negative, the idea that objective reality is negative, that it's a set of limits, that it's a set of things that we have to pass. Like we can't, certainly things we can't do, but it's an open space in which we project positives in order to have certain things, accomplish certain goals, have certain experiences. And then as long as our projections don't get negated by anything in the objective world, then we break through, then stuff happens. And that's what I continually experience with magic. And the astonishing thing is this actually matches the definition of science by Karl Popper, which revolves around falsification and the idea that nothing is actually confirmed, but things simply are able to survive falsification to a greater and greater extent. And that it's not actually that the positive ideas of science are part of a paradigm that gets shuffled in and out every scientific revolution, rather than being this eternal, unchangeable truth. And that's a false vision that we've gotten from a lot of materialists, is that science presents this eternal, unchangeable truth. And when you actually get into the philosophy of science, you're like, oh, that's not it at all. And so reality just becomes a lot weirder. And so the weirdness of material reality that I've discovered through philosophy helped me to reconcile with the weirdness of magic.
Not only is it hard to, reconcile yourself to the experiencing of less than 5% of reality, but the idea that there can be realities beyond our own is so problematic for theory.
Totally. Yeah. That's why
you see it represented in experiments, right? And in our practices, whether it's even scientific or magical, because they have these quirky areas in which things don't go exactly the way you'd expect, right? Which you could science when it doesn't work, and magic when it works, in a way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. This is
works. It's kind of amazing when it really works, or when you target it correctly, or at it, I suppose. But like you'll see it seems like miracles are happening. It seems like miracles are happening.
Yes.
Really doing it a lot. It sort of seems like your life is just kind of blessed, right? Like
yes. Yeah.
If I told my friends back in those days, it's like, oh, we're going to go here and we're going to, get in for free and go backstage and meet all the people. They didn't question me anymore. They just knew. And sometimes they wouldn't come because they're like, I know I have such a bad mentality. If I come, it might not work out well. It's like, thanks for letting me know. You are correct about that. Your attitude sucks. It still come anyways because we're gonna have a great time. No, I shouldn't come. I'll ruin it. Okay, whatever. You probably actually have a booty call or something. That's probably why you're not coming. We'll just go off, and things flow in that magical kind of way. And that's sort of how I lived a lot of my life. Honestly, is like living in that flow, and just sort of taking the advice from the spirits around me and making radical decisions based on it. And it didn't always work out, that's for sure, but I think it led to a more interesting life than had I behaved in a purely logical fashion. I was told. I mean, life's hard to plan anyway, no matter what.
Yeah.
But certainly I think look back on decisions where I made the magical choice versus the logical
choice.
or societal choice.
Yeah.
It's shocking how many times, right? Like the magic one did seem insane, but had I the other one, I would have been really screwed. So that's always fascinating to me is how many times magic has saved me from a very obvious, safe, sane pathway that would have led to utter destruction.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's was it a lot of people find magic at their lowest point, like I did. It's just that if there's no logical, safe way to respond to your situation, you might as well try the unsafe, unsafe way that's not as well understood. And that's been the case for me. It's like so many times I've stepped into something that I visualized, something that I wrote down a petition to, something that I decided to manifest, and all of a sudden I'm there, I'm living it. And the gap between imagination and reality becomes like this thin veil that you can actually traverse when you know the passwords, when you get the permission from the spirits to walk over, when you know the right magic. And it's like this backstage pass where your imagination becomes a place that materializes that you can step into and other people agree to. And yeah, you just get to live in the world that you have created through magic. And this is where I try to get all my clients to, is a space where they can have a job that they love, a living situation that they love, a partnership and family relationships that they love. And that's your entire world. It's like what you do for a living, where you live, and like a handful of people. And if you can make that heavenly, then you're in heaven. Like you don't need to do anything more than that. And there's so much that you can, there's so much doubt around magic that just evaporates when you realize like, oh, none of my life would look like this if I didn't decide that it would look like this and make it look like this through magic. And I've had, that experience so many times.
When I look back on how many people joined the Golden Dawn after me, well, first of all, if I could go back in time, I'd give my advice to anyone out there who's thinking about having friends or family, and I wouldn't let that happen. If you're in a temple or a magical group, don't let your friends or family in. That would be my advice. But I didn't have that advice in those days, and who am I to stop people from doing something that's turned my life around, right? Like seriously, like how arrogant would you have to be like to pull that ladder up behind you?
Plenty of people do it, but it's not nice. And also I feel it's so much better when you share it, because when you share power, it's fantastic because people want you to succeed. You have other people there that are actually happy for your success. Whereas if you're always trying to compete and screw other people over, then you're always like looking out behind your back. So the more you can, this is what I find continuously with building a magic community, the more that you can do to empower other people by giving your advice, by sharing what worked for you, and creating a space where anybody can share what worked for them. And I have, we have several published authors in the group now, BJ Swain, Marco Visconti, Alison Chakowski, and their help for people asking questions about magic who and getting into it for the first time is so invaluable. And the more that we can share knowledge and help each other and empower each other, the more that we just we want to support each other more. So it's
it's really great those people are in your group. Otherwise I'd have no one to argue with.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I love too, is that I love spirited debate. I love people having genuine disagreements and being able to talk about them in a respectful manner. And I just created a space where that can happen. It makes me so happy. So
there's nothing more that children of the Aquarian age love and will continue to love as we enter into this delightful, magical age of Aquarius than telling other people they're wrong. What do you think about that? Like the fact that we're here in that intermedial phase.
Oh, I think it's it's a potential heaven for magicians and a potential hell for everyone else. So I think that the chaos that comes from that confusion, that comes from like one method of doing things into another, and we're experiencing that in so many ways, in so many transitionary periods, through technology, through politics, through economics, through climate change. Like everything that's changing it's far beyond the astrology is coinciding with it, as it always does. But there's so much upheaval, but I feel like that chaos is magic. That chaos is all of this energy that's freely available. And when you have a really specific drive and focus, and you don't know what to do with all of this energy that people don't know how to put together, you'll magnetize people. You'll be able to create incredible outsized results because everyone's looking for somebody who has any confidence or clue of what they're doing. And when they see that, they want to be a part of it, because people want to be a part of something that has a firm foundation, that has firm direction, and that's going someplace that's meaningful. And if you can provide that, then you'll have so much more influence, practically speaking, and you'll also be able to do magic even if nobody knows about you or knows your existence, in a much more effective way. I think for people that, grew up in an age that was cozy, I was an 80s kid, 90s kid, and it seemed like society had its stuff together, and it seemed like there was a purpose to being in the United States of America, and that we were going somewhere, and that's completely changed. But I feel that if you're too attached to that mindset where you expect society to take care of you, to give you stuff, to give you a sense of purpose, and to help you figure out how to live your life, it's going to be merciless until you start to claim your own power, whether that's through magic or any other way. It's completely open-ended, because if you have a philosophical structure in which all things are one, then you're still relating to that one through every deity you work with, every angel you invoke. You're relating to that one through every person you talk to. Like, everything is a manifestation of that one essential entity, and it's through developing a relationship with that, you learn to extend that relationship to having good relationships with other people one-on-one, with with deities one-on-one, with specific one-on-one, and finding out how that relation, and with yourself as well. And I find that finding that essential unity, and that, again, that space of overlap where we're made to be different, but if there's something that we can come together and do together, then that's essential, and we should do that. And the more that we can honor each other through that collective work, the more that we each become greater.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I would like Western magic to grow together more, rather than the grimoire purists over there. And again, I love being. I'm a very traditionalist kind of person, right? If I hadn't done all the magical, initiatory, and spiritual stuff I had done, I'd be such a different person. I think people have. It's hard to understand, but like, as an Aquarian, like, we're naturally very dogmatic, very authoritarian, and very arrogant. And let's just say I was a very different person in high school, but that stuff sort of you can't stay that way and go through and finish the Golden Dawn system.
Exactly.
Second order. Oh my God. Like, the months I spent in Portal was brutal. It was a brutal alembic. And if people have similar experiences doing the Abramelin, that's great. Though I usually hear more about people who are like, the profundity of the appearance of a spirit, rather than the transformation of the alchemical process we go through in the Golden Dawn in that Portal grade, right? Like,
totally.
Months, and for me, I was so young. I was 18 when I started Portal, so it made sense. So from Easter grade 12 to winter solstice, of college, like, that was just, it kicked the shit out of me. I had to drop out of school actually for months, because it was too much. I've never really described it in those terms before, but I'd like to see the purists of whatever grimoires. And again, I respect the traditionalism. My dogmatic Aquarian self loves it, which is why I practice like purist Enochian these days so much. I love it. I go into a completely different state with these prayers and the preparations. It's a whole thing in itself. It really is stepping into a whole other special little world, which is different from when I use like the Golden Dawn Enochian of my regular modern magical practice. But ultimately, I'd like to see grimoire practitioners become more hospitable to what I like to think of as modern magic, right?
I think that's I think it's definitely possible. The part of the Hermetic Kabbalah, as I was taught of it, is this idea of a path of redemption, that there is a fall built into the structure of manifestation, that divinity comes down to the density of material world, and through being born in material bodies, it realizes that we're all such assholes and that there's so much that needs to be done to purify ourselves, theurgic work to become more like this beautiful, pure divinity that we all manifested from. And the analogy that I use for the possibility of redemption is actually the human body. Like, every body in your cell, every cell in your body is essentially a kind of individual. It has its own cell walls, it has its own organelles, and it's its own world unto itself. And yet it's able to work in perfect harmony with all the cells around it, even though there's so much radical difference between, a brain cell and a liver cell. Yet you need both of them to enjoy alcohol. So these things work together in really profound ways, and they are all you. Like, they're able to work together with such complete ease that they can create a being that's bigger than any of them. And I feel like that's what redemption is really about. It's actually just health. It doesn't mean that we're going to be living in a permanent utopia, that everything's going to be happy in every moment, but there's going to be a healthiness to humanity overall that we've never experienced before. And I think that we can start to develop that in our own lives, by just deciding to not be in conflict, to develop harmonious relationships with people we can, and to not worry so much or not spend time with people that we can't get along with. And I find that the more that we structure our lives in this way, then the more that we find ways to improve each other's lives and empower each other. And when you're in a community of people that genuinely want the best for you, it's the best feeling. This is what I love from meeting other magicians and working with other magicians. Like, there's so many incredibly genuine, kind-hearted people in my community that I've worked with and done magic with. And we just want each other to succeed without qualification. We're willing to do anything we can to help each other. And when you have that kind of support, it's life-changing. So I think that's what I've experienced from the magic community, is people who have come to magic from different paths, different ways, doing sometimes different kinds of magic, but we've converged on this common sort of Golden Dawn style magic that's become really popular because of the availability of all these books and all these courses. And we've used that as this foundation to work together, to support each other, and to understand each other and have compassion for each other. And that's completely changed my life. I think the magic community can be more like that in the broad strokes, when we realize that even if we're doing totally different traditions, we can still perform different functions towards a single goal. And I feel that is so essential when it comes to people asking questions about magic and getting advice. You'll get, here's a grimoire interpretation and answer, here's a Golden Dawn answer, here's a Wiccan answer, here's all these different answers. And then people can start to figure out, okay, what makes sense to me? What do I want to do? And there's such a trust and empowerment that comes with that comes with presenting people with multiple genuine options and saying, who are you? What is your free will saying? Who do you want to become? And, trusting your own intuition to guide you down the best path. Because even if it doesn't lead to success every time, the practice of learning to work with your intuition, I find, is completely life-changing and allows you to define yourself. And that's what I find is so essential in magical communities, is for people to be free to be themselves, to not necessarily be stuck with a certain dogma. And if people have that, and it doesn't mean that you can be anything, it doesn't mean that you can say that you're anything. You can't claim that you're this kind of magician when you're not doing any of that. But it's a way of respecting different approaches. And if we can respect each other and the way that we produce results with magic, then we can work towards common goals, and we can work towards the goal of mutual empowerment, helping you to be more effective in your magic practice, and I will help you and support you in every way that I can. And yeah, that's what I find most miraculous about the ways that we fit together.
What do you think, to what extent do you think we can change in our lifetimes the world to be a bit more hospitable to the challenge, to I guess you could call it the cathedra?
Yeah. So this is something I got from reading Meditations on the Tarot, which I have a great course on, is the idea that there's a huge difference between force and genuine authority. Genuine authority rules with the scepter. It is nonviolent. It rules because you trust the person in charge to do what's best for everyone. When you put down the scepter and start using the sword, that's because your authority is gone. Your authority is waning. It's because you need to force people to do things, because you still have, you still have the ability to exercise and control people, but you don't have the ability to make people believe in you anymore. And that's the crisis that we're having right now, is a crisis of faith in governments all around the world and institutions of all kinds. And the crisis of faith just belies the fact that we're in a huge transition. It may take a while. They may be able to hang on to that power for a long time, but I think it is fundamentally about power. It's not about truth. It's not because they believe that anything they think is true. They might, but I think there's this primordial sense of I'm in control. and I will hang on to it the nice way if I can, but the not nice way if I can't. And that's kind of just human nature, unfortunately. Like, we don't let go of things very easily. And so you can expect that people in institutions of power, this is exactly what we were talking about with the scientific revolution, the replication crisis in psychology. The people who are in entrenched positions of power have the option to not listen. They have the option to not give up their posts because their posts are based on research that has proven to be not verifiable. They have the option to use force rather than using authority, and so they do. And so it's going to take a lot longer because of that. So it's really a delay tactic. I mean, the things that will whatever new structures arise will arise because they have genuine authority, because people actually believe in them. Maybe not everybody, but enough people. And the structures that nobody believes in, that are just clinging to power through force, they're going to slowly go away, because that force is it has a shelf life. Once you start using force, it's because the authority is gone, and now it's a waiting game. And I feel like that's what the rest of us need to do, is just play the waiting game. Now, that waiting may take the rest of our lives. It's not going to be super quick, but we're still going to be part of a positive movement where doing what we can to the extent that we can. And I do really appreciate the amount of freedom we still have when it comes to having a podcast like this. Was it creating communities around magic, like talking to people? I live in Boulder. It's a really spiritually open place where I can just go to a public park and do magic with people, and people like may turn their heads, but nobody really cares. And there's so much allowance and tolerance that we hadn't didn't have during the Inquisition, let's say that. I think there's tremendous opportunities to focus on yourself, focus on your life, focus on making everything good for you, so that you have a stable foundation to support others. This is the problem, is that we were raised, I was like as an 80s baby, 90s baby, in a society that's just expected society to do everything. And so when society is falling apart, people say, oh, well, we need a new society, but people don't realize that the society is built from individuals, and in particular, individual leaders. Like, no matter how collective a movement is, if you don't have individual leaders, nothing gets started. So you need people to organize and figure out what to do to work together with each other to create movements.
Yeah, Boulder.
Yeah.
Town, Naropa University.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Alan,
Totally.
School, how appropriate is it that I quoted Allen Ginsberg earlier?
Very appropriate. Yeah, it's a great place.
Yeah. Does it have many groups already? Like, it must have some sort of small pagan community or something, being such a
Oh yeah, I just haven't been that involved, since a lot of the spirituality out here tends to be extremely on the New Age side of things. And so as more of the occultism, where it's disciplined, where there's like books to read, and there's a structure, and there's a philosophy, and there's daily practice. That amount of discipline doesn't always go over here. But I have started to make, actually through the Facebook group, it's so weird now, they have to go to the digital to find people in the real world. And yeah, that's been cool though, is finding more people in Boulder local, and started to have my first in-person magic lessons as a result of that in Denver. So there's more community opportunities happening as we expand, but it's still slow going. It's just a different take on spirituality, but a lot of people are interested in it because they found the at least for them, the obstacles with other paths, like the same thing that Damien and I experienced with meditation. Like, we reached a certain level with it, and then it's like, okay, I don't know where to go from here. I don't know how to get to another transformation, another next level, after 10 years of meditation in my case. And I feel a lot of people are finding frustrations with other spiritual paths, and that's leading them to take a look at what else is out there. And a lot of people are finding magic through that. Okay, what is all this about? By looking at other paths and realizing, like, oh, here's a really structured, disciplined way of doing magic that reportedly gets astonishing, life-changing results. Maybe we should look into that. Maybe we should read more about that. And yeah, I didn't mention previously, but another one of the most powerful personal experiences I had was through the Holy Guardian Angel. So that's one of the reasons I emphasize with it, is that through teaching the Holy Guardian Angel is where I had a lot of my biggest personal transformations. And one of them is what I call contact, where it's not the full coronation of getting a head spirit, but it's a sense in which the holy guardian angel as a presence starts to become more part of your etheric body than just like a concept, an idea that you're working with, or something outside of you that you communicate. There's some sort of merge happening there. The way that I experienced it was over the course of an afternoon. I'd been depressed since the age of 12, and finding my heart opening up into an overwhelming self-love that I'd never experienced before, that I have experienced every moment since, and having that be the result of over 40 days of continually invoking this spirit using its name and symbol. And the same week that happened, I lost my job of 2 years and my girlfriend of 5 years. And it's like, it was really astonishing to me how much that spirit and authenticity worked together, where I was, everything that was inauthentic in my life immediately vanished as soon as this energy started coming in. And then I started communicating to this energy to figure out, okay, what do I do now? And it was scary for a while. For a couple of months, I realized, I asked a question: did I just lose my survival instinct? Is that all that happened? And it was through really trusting my intuition deeply, again, like doing the magical choice rather than the logical choice, that I've been able to make it as a professional spiritual teacher and completely transform my life to the way it is now.
There's always the worry that you're enculturating yourself, just becoming your own cult guru, and but at the same time brainwashing yourself into, some pocket of reality that you have to, of course, commodify to keep alive, even though it's ontologically empty. That's the argument, right? That's back to the horrifying
skepticism. Yeah. But I mean, that's also the existential terror of other people. Like, you can't look inside someone's head, so you don't know their attainments, you don't know what they've experienced. There's no receipts for any of the magical experiences that you've had. There's no receipts for the magical experiences that I've had. So I'm not really worried about how much people believe in me. I'm more worried about them. What can I help them to accomplish? Like, that's amazing. That's what will really make people believe in magic. Something that happens to them. Anything that happened to me. This is the trouble when it comes to talking about experiences, is as soon as you talk about experiences, people say, oh, that's bullshit. And I don't care. Like, it was good for me. It doesn't have to be good for you. It wasn't your experience. If you want your own good experience through magic, here's how I did it. Try it, see if it works for you. If not, there's all these other traditions that you can try too. That's what I like about building a magical community, is people can find things that work for them. They don't necessarily have to take my courses or do what I did to experience amazing benefits. And that's what I'm really concerned about, is that I don't think I'll ever be able to convince somebody that my experiences are the way that they are. But it's, if I can help them to have their own, then I don't need to.
Right. It's your faith that has healed you.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a whole nother topic that's fascinating, is like looking at Jesus as a magician. And this is one thing that I read from like John Michael Greer's occult book, but I've seen in other sources, which is this account of
magician.
Yeah. Simply someone who learned magic, possibly through the ages between 12 and 30 that we don't have an account of. And then once he mastered it, started going around making all these incredible changes and transformations and creating this entire movement. And I think there's incredible magical power in the idea that people give away their power to authority figures. People give away and not just magical ones. Like, people are always scared of the cult leader, but like, there's also the politician, there's also the CEO, there's also all of these people in society that everybody gives away their power to, and they say, well, I'm powerless. Well, yeah, because you gave it all away. The moment that you reclaim your power, you realize you have so many more options than you could imagine before, because you didn't imagine that you had power in the first place. You gave it all away. But the moment that, and this is why we need leaders who are willing to say, it is your faith that healed you, or willing to say, it is your own power that's doing this. It's nothing you're getting from me. I'm not the vendor of this. I'm just helping to point you to yourself, where you already have the power to do everything that you want to do in the first place.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Man, it would be great to do all of these in person. If I could do if I could be an in-person podcaster. I just don't think there's enough commodification yet of our ontologically empty tradition, ontological reality. Perhaps at least commodification to the extent that we can continue to have great events and maybe more like, you know, I wish there was like a magical podcast like show, you know, like how
Totally.
they political and other kinds of shows that you know, wreck my head. Want to
Well,
show magicians are sitting around and doing that, that'd be great.
I mean, we are magicians. If we want to live in that world, we just have to manifest it.
Well, that's what we're talking about, right? You and I have had some interesting conversations. I think and I have already outlined, you know, at least the initial 10% of our first board game venture.
Yes, yeah, and thanks to make it more well known, more mainstream. It's funny to me, I can't really take Adorno's argument seriously when money itself is a talisman. Like I have a dollar bill that I use in a lot of talks here because there's an all-saying eye here, there's a pyramid here, there's so many occult symbols here. It's a talisman. It's made of paper. It's only there because we believe it's only has value because we believe it has value. And we believe it has inherent value. And what's astonishing is we think money, paper has inherent value. We think that we as human beings have contingent value. As backwards as you can get it. We have inherent value. Money has contingent value. Like there's and it's so backwards the way their society is built because we've designed these structures of magic, of imagination, to funnel power in specific ways to benefit a minority of people at the expense of everybody else. And once you understand magic, you're like, oh, I just don't have to take that game seriously anymore. I can start to create my own value. And what's amazing about our society is that you can turn value into money. So if you create something that's valuable, people will pay you money for it. And through that, you can start to engage into the same system. You don't even have to start building your own parallel society that based on a different form of exchange. You can just establish that what you are doing has value and is worth interest, and then other people will participate freely. And I think that's an incredible opportunity, and we should use it to create all kinds of weird and interesting societies that shouldn't be possible, but are just because we can communicate and start to express value in ways that other people haven't normally experienced it.
So you know, as much as you can work with spirits, like for me for working for keeping going, you know, Akaya as the Shem Angel is a great one. Is for keeping you going. Of course, if you're doing the wrong thing, he'll keep you doing the wrong thing. Even though you should stop. So that's you got to watch out. But if you know you're doing the right thing, great angel to have you just keep going forward systematically, step by step. I highly recommend that spirit for that.
I second that. I second that entirely. I actually started working with the Kaya last week, so it's an incredible synchronicity every day. Yeah.
Oh wow. We had no communication. We've only recently met.
Yes.
And I did that working with my school behind the wall, so no one that. So yeah, you couldn't have found out about it any other. No. It's amazing. Yeah, Kai is wonderful. I love that this year has been two studies primarily for me. Tomberg, who's all about Christianizing Hermetica and again Hermetism in Hermeticism. And then on the other side, I'm studying a lot of you know, Jake Stratton Kent, and he's all about you know, Christianizing Hermetica and finding its pagan roots and origins again. So it's a double action that's quite, I think, necessary and healthy. You need that. Like paradox is so crucial.
Really?
Don't you think paradox in itself, like, isn't there a paradox even within the number one?
Yeah. Well, I think to me it's different just because as a philosopher, I try to stamp out paradox wherever I see it. And I'm literally trying to find
if the fundamental unit of reality is a paradox.
Oh, I mean, I don't think it's any more of a paradox than your own body. The fact that you are one being made out of all of these different parts and organs and cells and everything else. I just feel that that's a revelation of the one, that we're in the body of God. Like that's basically the philosophical implication of it. It's not so much a paradox as it is a really disturbing reality, that we're all part of a single individual entity that is constantly at war with itself and doesn't know how to live with itself. And that's, you know, H.P. Lovecraft called it Azathoth and really ran for it for a while. Like the horror of what the one really is. But to me, it's not so much a paradox as it is something disturbing. And their mysticism sometimes provides that veil where it's not even supposed to be mystical. It's just supposed to, not freak people out until they get to a point where they can really accept what it means for everything to be one, and all of the disturbing implications of that, and how much impetus is on us to really be better, like not be so much in conflict with everything else, because then we're ultimately just harming ourselves. So
yeah. I've heard scientists talk about how one contains this sort of paradoxical. I wish I had more lifetimes to live and I could do it all.
Oh yeah, the one many paradox is really big in philosophy, but I always took the view that totality is kind of the third balancing point. Like if you think of one and many as a dualism, like there is no solution, because dualisms by definition don't have any solution. Like they need two sides in order to exist. This is why you have these really dualistic movements that have witch hunts or whatever else, and like have to invent enemies, because after they defeat their enemies they lose all identity if they don't come up with more enemies. So yeah, that's the trap of dualism. And if you think of one many as a dualism, like there is no solution, but if you think of it as a trinity, where you have one many and a totality that incorporates both of these aspects, then it makes sense, as far as I'm concerned. So to me, it's more a matter of how you approach it, rather than it being like irreconcilable in itself. But that's I like philosophy, so that's how I do it.
Prophecy is one of the few things I deeply believe in, only because I've experienced it on a shocking level. Otherwise, I'd probably be much more, whatever about it, until you experience it, of course. And then you're like, oh, you can really prophesize stuff. You really can. And I saw that play out, because of course, the first time I heard prophecies given as an adept in the inner order, I was, I had as much skepticism as was absolutely appropriate. Not necessarily in the moment, though it's hard to avoid entirely in the moment of perception of the prophecy with a group of people.
Yeah.
And I thought and for years it was something in my mind that was counting against the tradition and counting against my experiences. It was proof to the negative of what I was a part of, like proof that there was a bad side to it.
Yeah.
Prophecies came true on a right. And it's like, I don't know what to do with that. I've talked about them lots of other times on the podcast. It's like, so yeah, I believe that's real now. I believe that, and it makes sense when you think about how dreams work, and you dream things that are happening in the future. I've had entire dreams that cover an entire part of my life that hasn't happened, that I'm sure will never happen. Then 20 years later, oh shit, I'm in the middle of it. I'm in the middle of these dreams I was having, as a
Totally.
Have you had those experiences?
Oh my gosh. So one of the
Look at us talking experiences.
Oh yeah. No, more talk about experiences. So one of the things that makes me believe the Holy Guardian Angel is a real phenomenon is looking back at miraculous experiences that I had when I was an atheist, and I still had miraculous experiences. I just discounted them as temporary insanity or like some other rationalization, but it was explicitly a rationalization. It didn't stand up to scrutiny. It was just there for me to dismiss what had happened. Experiences where I was in a car crash that was predicted by a dream, where I had the dream of being in a car and it crashing and going over the edge and into a forest, and landing and surviving, but being really beat up. Had a very, very similar experience where driving back from a concert, car crashed. This was a tractor trailer just jammed itself into the highway. Everybody had to make space for it. Everyone had a space to go to except for us. Bounced off the left guardrail, spun off across 4 lanes of traffic, was about to go over a ledge into a forest. As this was happening, I popped out of my body. I heard like as soon as the airbag popped, totally different state of consciousness, popped out of my body. I heard be not afraid, like the angel speaking to me. And then I'm like, what's going on? And then I turned not my head, but my consciousness. I was able to see sably outside of my body, 4 lanes of traffic oncoming towards us, and realizing that none of those cars were going to hit us, and immediately feeling a sense of complete calm and safety as I was spinning out across 4 lanes of traffic. and then instead of going into the forest, I actually managed to catch the cables just enough to where the car swerved into the cable and was left dangling off the side of the cliff rather than dropping, the 20, 30 feet down to the forest below. So yeah, that was my experience of an angel before any communion with the angel. Yeah.
Thanks for being on Magic Without Fears. What's
yes.
People find you? What's your Facebook group?
Facebook group is Esoterica, Occult Science, and All Things Magic. And hopefully we can put a link in the description. And my website is marcusmattern.net. And you can find me also at the esotericmagicshop.com, which we're currently getting up. So yeah, we'll be doing ritual recordings, ritual guides, and all kinds of products that are interesting to people who like magic.
Yeah, wonderful. And you do a Sunday Zoom hangout.
Yes. So if you want to do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram in the middle pillar with me and with anyone else who's showing up, we have a nice constant cast of people who do magic with us. It's about 10 people, give or take. And you can join the group and you'll get an invite. You'll see the events page and you can start to do magic with other people, start to experience that shared energy that we all love, and start to really get into it, start to develop friends who do magic, which is really fun to have. So many solo practitioners out there we need to meet, we need to hang out. It's a good time.
Well, I would love for you to grow the Boulder scene, because Colorado's always sounded like a cool place to me. I have very good friends in Boulder, and I've had family there in the past, and I've connections to the Naropa Institute, which is a very cool, very, very cool school. And what a great note to end on. So thanks
Awesome.
and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Goodbye.